Across time and continents, powerful civilizations rose only to vanish into silence. Who were they? What secrets did they guard? From the deserts of Arabia to the jungles of South America, these lost cultures left behind ruins, myths, and mysteries. This is the story of a forgotten world. The Dednetizin, the arid heart of the Arabian Peninsula, nestled among the ochre cliffs of present-day Al-Ula, traces of an ancient kingdom still whisper through stone. This was Dedan, the realm of the Dedanites, one of the earliest known civilizations of northern Arabia, and a gateway between cultures, deserts, and distant empires. Flourishing between the 7th and 5th centuries BCE, Dedan was strategically located along the incense and caravan routes, serving as a keystone for traders journeying between southern Arabia and the Mediterranean. Its capital, also called Dedan, was more than a trading post. It was a vibrant city of temples, tombs, and inscriptions, surrounded by fertile oases that made life possible in the unforgiving terrain. The Dedanites spoke an early form of the South Semitic languages and left behind hundreds of inscriptions in the Dadanetic script, one of the most extensive corpuses in pre-Islamic Arabia. These writings mention kings, judges, and religious practices, offering tantalizing glimpses into a structured society with legal systems and spiritual rites. Lion statues guarding tombs suggest a belief in protection in the afterlife, while rock-cut sanctuaries reveal a devotion to deities now lost to time. But despite its prominence, Dedan eventually faded, perhaps overtaken by the rising Lionite kingdom or simply undone by shifting trade networks and desert pressures. Its people disappeared, their voices reduced to fading letters on sandstone walls. What caused the decline of such a well-placed and well-organized society? Was it conquest, climate, or something still hidden beneath the desert floor? The ruins of Dedan remain silent yet watchful, guarding the secrets of a civilization whose story is only just beginning to emerge from the dust. The Tamar kingdom, deep in the barren expanses of northwestern Arabia, lies an oasis that once pulsed with life, diplomacy, and distant echoes of empire. This is Tamar, an ancient kingdom that served as a crossroads of cultures and a haven for kings, merchants, and mystery. First inhabited as early as the Bronze Age, Tamar rose to prominence around the first millennium BCE. Its strategic location on the incense and trade routes made it a coveted destination for travelers and caravans journeying between Mesopotamia, Arabia, and Egypt. Unlike many ancient Arabian settlements, Tamar possessed a steady water supply, its fertile oasis supporting agriculture, commerce, and a stable urban life. Archaeological finds reveal an unusually cosmopolitan society. Inscriptions in Tamanetic, Aramaic, and Akkadian point to multilingual trade and cultural exchange. The city's fortified walls, temples, and administrative buildings suggest a high degree of organization and prosperity. One of Tamar's most intriguing chapters came in the 6th century BCE, when Babylonian king Nabonidus I, ruler of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, unexpectedly left his capital and took residence in Tamar for nearly a decade. Why he abandoned Babylon remains unclear, but in Tamar he worshipped the moon god Sbn and commissioned temple restorations blending Mesopotamian and Arabian traditions in a rare historical moment. Eventually, Tamar's political autonomy faded under the growing influence of neighboring powers like the Nabateans, but the ruins remain inscribed with names, prayers, and treaties guarding the memory of a desert kingdom that once stood at the center of the ancient world. What drew a Babylonian king to this remote oasis? And what deeper truths still lie beneath its sands? In Tamar, the desert keeps its secrets quiet, preserved, and waiting. The Olmegar civilization, long before the rise of Mesopotamia or Egypt. In the windswept valleys of the Arabian Peninsula, an ancient and largely forgotten culture left behind traces of a surprising legacy. This is the mystery of the Olmegar civilization, one of the oldest known cultures in Arabia, and perhaps one of the first to domesticate the horse. Discovered in the southwestern region of modern-day Saudi Arabia, Olmegar dates back over 9,000 years, placing it in the Neolithic period. What makes this site remarkable is not just its age, but the sophistication of its artifacts. Among them is a life-size stone carving of a horse, or perhaps an early domesticated equidae, with evidence of a halter or bridle. If verified, this could shift the timeline of horse domestication back by millennia and place it not in Central Asia, as widely believed, but in Arabia. Stone tools, Pottery fragments and carved objects suggest a settled, pastoral community, one that may have practiced animal domestication, agriculture, and early forms of symbolic art. Yet no written records remain, and the site remains only partially excavated. Scholars are still debating the full significance of Olmützer. Was it truly a center of early domestication, or was it a sacred site dedicated to animals that held spiritual meaning for its people? As excavations continue, each artifact adds to a growing picture of a civilization far more advanced, far older than once imagined. The sands of Almagar have kept their secrets for thousands of years, but now they may be ready to tell a story that could rewrite the origins of Arabian and even global. The Muisca Confederation high in the misty plateaus of the Colombian Andes, long before the rise of the Inca or the arrival of the Spanish, a complex and deeply spiritual society flourished among lakes, mountains, and gold. This was the Muisca Confederation, an alliance of chiefdoms, bound not by empire, but by shared beliefs, trade, and ritual. The Muisca people thrived from around 600 CE until the early 16th century, centered in the highlands of present-day Cundinamarca and Bui. Unlike other great civilizations of the Americas, they built no grand stone cities or pyramids. Instead, they organized into a loose confederation ruled by two main leaders, the Zepa of Bogota and the Zak of Hunza. Each governed their region through a network of subordinate chiefs, using diplomacy, tribute, and ceremony to maintain order. The Muisca economy was remarkably advanced. They were skilled in agriculture, mining, and long-distance trade, exchanging salt, emeralds, and textiles across vast distances. But it was their association with gold that would ignite European imaginations. Their sacred rituals, most famously, the El Dorado ceremony, involved a chieftain covered in gold dust, casting treasures into Lake Guatavita as offerings to the gods. This golden image captivated Spanish conquistadors, who scoured the region for the mythical city of gold. But El Dorado was never a place, it was a belief, a rite, a symbol of power and transcendence. When the Spanish arrived, the Muisca resisted fiercely, but their decentralized structure proved vulnerable. Within a generation, their confederation had unraveled. Today, the legacy of the Muisca lives on in legend, language, and the ripples of Lake Guatavita, where, even now, divers search the depths, chasing a myth born from a truth the Muisca never wrote down, but lived. The Torona civilization high in the cloud-draped mountains of northern Colombia, hidden between dense jungle and misty peaks. The Torona civilization once thrived in harmony with nature and left behind cities of stone that few outsiders ever saw, flourishing from around 200 CE until the Spanish conquest in the 17th century. The Torona inhabited the slopes of the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, a sacred landscape they called home. Rather than build on open plains, they constructed their settlements into the mountains themselves, most famously the stone terraces and roads of Ciudad Perdida, or the Lost City, which predates Machu Picchu by centuries. The Torona were master engineers and craftspeople. Their cities were laid out with precision, using circular stone platforms connected by stairways and drainage systems that endured centuries of rain and erosion. They cultivated terraced fields, maintained forested buffer zones, and lived in complex, clan-based communities led by spiritual political leaders known as mamos. Their artisans produced intricate goldwork, ceramics, and stone carvings, many of which reflect deep cosmological beliefs tied to balance, fertility, and the rhythms of the natural world. Trade connected them to other societies across the Caribbean and Andean regions. But when the Spanish arrived, tensions escalated. Though the Torona initially resisted colonization, their decentralized structure and spiritual worldview made them targets of religious and military campaigns. By the 1600s, much of their civilization had been scattered or destroyed. Today, their descendants, the Kogi, Arhuaco, Waiwa, and Canquio-Mostil, live in the Sierra Nevada, guarding the traditions and sacred knowledge of the Torona. What secrets remain in the buried cities of their ancestors? And what wisdom still lingers in the mountains they call the heart of the world? The San Agustin culture in the green highlands of southern Colombia, where rivers cut through volcanic rock and dense forests whisper with age. Mysterious stone figures stand silently among the hills. They are the guardians of a forgotten world. San Agustin culture, one of South America's oldest and least understood civilizations, flourishing between 1000 BCE and 1500 CE. The San Agustin people left behind no written records, no known cities, and no monumental palaces, yet their legacy endures in the form of massive stone sculptures, burial mounds, and ceremonial sites suggesting a society deeply rooted in ritual, symbolism, and the cycles of life and death. The most striking artifacts are the statues, towering figures carved from volcanic stone, depicting gods, warriors, shamans, and animals often fused together in surreal, hybrid forms. Some bear fierce expressions, others appear serene or otherworldly. Many guard tombs beneath artificial mounds, suggesting a strong belief in the afterlife and ancestor veneration. Archaeologists have also uncovered advanced agricultural terraces, water channels, and ceremonial platforms, evidence of a sophisticated society attuned to both its environment and spiritual world. But the identity of the San Agustin people remains elusive. Were they a single kingdom, or a network of loosely connected tribes? Why did they vanish so suddenly around the time of the Spanish arrival? Even today, much of their story is guesswork, built from stone, soil, and silence. In the valleys of San Agustin, the statues still watch the horizon, weathered but unmoved, their expressions carved in mystery, as if waiting for someone to finally understand what was lost, and why. The Quimbaya civilization in the lush river valleys of Colombia's western Andes, where gold glitters beneath forest canopies and rivers trace ancient paths through the land. The Quimbaya civilization once flourished, quietly sophisticated, deeply spiritual, and wrapped in mystery. From around 500 CE to 1600 CE, the Quimbaya inhabited what is now the departments of Quindio Caldas and Risaralda. They lived in small, decentralized communities nestled in fertile valleys, cultivating maize, yucca, and fruit, and crafting some of the most exquisite goldwork ever produced in the ancient world. Their most iconic legacy is the Quimbaya collection of finely cast gold objects that includes ceremonial vessels, jewelry, and the famous paporos, or lime containers used in sacred rituals. Using advanced lost wax casting techniques, the Quimbaya shaped gold into flawless symmetry and intricate symbolic forms, often blending human, animal, and spiritual motifs. These were not merely decorative, they reflected status, belief, and a worldview steeped in nature, ancestry, and cosmic balance. Despite their skill and refinement, little is known about the Quimbaya's political structures or daily life. They left no written language, and Spanish chroniclers recorded them only in passing, often focusing more on the gold than the people who made it. As the Spanish conquest swept through the region, the Quimbaya were quickly overwhelmed. Disease, displacement, and forced assimilation erased much of their culture in just a few generations. Today, their golden artifacts remain gleaming in museums, whispering of a people who mastered their craft and honored their world, but whose voice has nearly vanished from history. What stories lie behind the shine of their gold, and how much more might we learn if only we could hear them? The Valdivia culture along the misty coastlines of ancient Ecuador, where the Pacific tides have rolled for millennia. A quiet revolution was unfolding, one of pottery, ritual, and enduring mystery. This was the Valdivia culture, among the oldest known settled societies in the Americas, emerging as early as 3500 BCE and thriving until around 1800 BCE. The Valdivia people lived in small coastal villages, relying on fishing, farming, and trade. They cultivated maize, beans, and squash, and developed one of the earliest known ceramic traditions in the Western Hemisphere, long before the great Andean empires would rise. Their pottery was both practical and symbolic, with polished red and grey vessels, cooking wares, and most notably these small clay statues, often female, with wide hips and detailed headdresses, suggest fertility rituals and a deeply spiritual worldview. Some believe they represent goddesses, ancestors, or even priestesses, though their true meaning remains uncertain. The Valdivia also built circular houses arranged around central plazas, indicating organized communal life and social structure. Trade with inland and coastal groups brought obsidian, shell, and exotic materials into their settlements, showing early signs of complex interaction networks. But around 1800 BCE, the culture began to decline, possibly due to environmental changes, shifting trade routes, or gradual assimilation into emerging societies. No great monuments mark their existence, only broken shards, figurines, and silent coastal mounds, yet their legacy endures. In their clay, we find the first artistic whispers of the Andes. In their figurines, a glimpse of belief long faded. What did the Valdivia see in the sea, the sky, and the fire? Their hands shaped the earth, but their thoughts remained buried within it. The Carrera cultured beneath the forested valleys and misty highlands of ancient Ecuador. Long before the rise of the Inca, a vibrant and inventive civilization flourished, known today as the Carrera culture. Though time has weathered their memory, their artistry still speaks in clay and color. The Carrera culture thrived between 1000 BCE and 300 BCE, emerging after the Valdivia and Macalilla cultures and spreading across much of the Ecuadorian lowlands, coast, and highland fringes. Their society was not defined by towering temples or massive cities, but by refinement in design, in craft, and in daily life. Among their most striking achievements is their ceramic work. Carrera artisans were master potters, producing polished vessels with naturalistic forms shaped like animals, plants, and even human figures. Their hallmark, however, was the whistling vessel, ingeniously designed ceramics that emitted musical tones when liquid was poured. These were not mere curiosities. They likely served ritual or ceremonial purposes, reflecting a culture attuned to sound, symbolism, and the unseen. The Carrera also developed vibrant trade networks. From the coast to the mountains, they exchanged obsidian, marine shells, and exotic woods. Their agricultural practices supported large communities, and their burial sites suggest social distinctions and spiritual beliefs tied to nature and ancestry. But by 300 BCE, the Carrera way of life began to fade, absorbed or replaced by emerging regional cultures like the Bahia and La Tolita. Whether through environmental shifts, cultural blending, or silent transformation, the Carrera vanished without a written record. All that remains are echoes in the shine of polished clay, the faint whistle of a forgotten vessel, and the enduring question: what stories lie behind the shapes they left behind? The Macalilla culture along the coastal plains of ancient Ecuador, where sea breezes met fertile river valleys, a quiet yet foundational culture once flourished. This was the Macalilla culture, an early pre-Columbian society whose influence helped shape the artistic and spiritual identity of the Andes, emerging around 1500 BCE and lasting until approximately 1100 BCE. The Macalilla people inhabited what is now the Manabi province and surrounding areas. Descended from the earlier Valdivia culture, they continued the traditions of settled village life, agriculture, and pottery, but added their own distinct voice to the region's unfolding story. Macalilla ceramics are among their most enduring legacies. Their pottery was characterized by innovative forms such as stirrup-spout vessels and sculptural bowls, many of which show anthropomorphic and zoomorphic features. These vessels weren't just utilitarian, they held symbolic and perhaps ritual significance, reflecting beliefs about nature, fertility, and the spirit world. The Macalilla were also early adopters of burial urns, where the dead were interred in large ceramic containers. This practice suggests a complex worldview surrounding death and ancestry, one that would influence later cultures. Across coastal and highland Ecuador, their settlements were typically small and scattered, supported by fishing, farming, and trade, though less monumental than later Andean civilizations. The Macalilla's contributions to social structure, art, and spirituality laid important groundwork. By 1100 BCE, their culture had begun to wane, possibly blending into or giving rise to the Carrera and other regional traditions. No written words explain their decline. Only fragments remain: clay forms, burial customs, and patterns etched into time. In the quiet earth of Ecuador's coast, the Macalilla speak not in language, but in form, inviting us to imagine the lives behind their enduring clay. The Bahia culture along the windswept coastlines of ancient Ecuador, where the Pacific crashes against rocky shores and river deltas give way to fertile lowlands. The Baa culture emerge, refined, expressive, and deeply interconnected with the wider world of pre-Columbian South America, flourishing between 500 BCE and 500 CE. The Baa culture occupied the central coast of Ecuador, primarily in the modern province of Manabi. Descended from earlier groups like the Carrera, the Ba built upon a foundation of artistic excellence, maritime trade, and symbolic expression, creating one of the most distinctive ceramic traditions of the region. Their hallmark was their figurines, elegantly stylized human forms with elaborate headdresses, jewelry, and serene almond-shaped eyes. These figures, often interpreted as ancestors, shamans, or deities, were not just decorative. They likely held spiritual significance, used in ritual contexts or as offerings. Many displayed details that hint at clothing, body adornment, and social roles, giving us a rare glimpse into cultural identity in a pre-literate society. Bahia ceramics also include fine vessels and incense burners, many crafted using molds and painted in red, cream, and black. Their craftsmanship reveals both technical mastery and symbolic depth, linking daily life with belief and ritual. The Bahia were also active traders. Archaeological finds show that they exchanged goods like spondylus shells, obsidian, and ceramics, with cultures far beyond their homeland, reaching into the Andes and even Mesoamerica. Their coastal location made them key players in a growing network of exchange and cultural flow. By around 500 CE, the Baa culture began to fade, eventually giving rise to or blending with new traditions like the Latolita. Yet their legacy remains etched in clay and shoreline, whispering stories through the figures they left behind. Who were the people behind those quiet, graceful eyes? And what voices still echo within the fired earth of Bahia? The Jamacoque culture on the lush, misty hills of Ecuador's northern coast, where cloud forests give way to fertile valleys and ocean breezes carry the scent of rain and salt. The Jamacoque culture once thrived, vivid, expressive, and spiritually rich. Flourishing from around 500 BCE to 1530 CE, the Jamacoque people lived in what is now Manabi and Esmeraldas provinces. They built their settlements on elevated ridges to protect from floods and to oversee the vast landscapes they farmed. Their society was structured, agricultural, and deeply connected to both land and sea. But it's their art, especially their ceramics, that continues to captivate scholars and storytellers alike. The Jamacoque are best known for their highly detailed figurines. These ceramic sculptures often depict men, women, warriors, shamans, and deities in mid-action dancing, sitting, adorned in elaborate headdresses, jewelry, face paint, and finely textured clothing. Each figure is a window into daily life, spiritual belief, and societal roles. Many wear breastplates, staffs, or masks, suggesting ceremonial importance or social hierarchy. Color was central to their artistry. Using natural pigments, they painted their ceramics in vibrant reds, greens, blues, and creams, bringing life and movement to otherwise still forms. Their vessels and incense burners were equally ornate, serving both functional and ritual roles. Trade connected Jamacoque with distant cultures, especially through the prized spondylus shell, which was both currency and sacred offering. Their coastal position placed them at the heart of pre-Columbian commerce, stretching from the Andes to Mesoamerica. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, the Jamacoque, like so many others, faded into colonial obscurity. But their figures endure, still expressive, still speaking, still alive in clay. What prayers did those painted lips once whisper? And what truths remain buried beneath Ecuador's emerald hills, waiting to rise again? The La Tolita culture on the remote, rain-soaked coastlines of northern Ecuador and southern Colombia, where rivers snake through dense mangrove forests and the Pacific crashes against black sand shores. A civilization of goldsmiths, sculptors, and visionaries once thrived. This was the La Tolita culture, mysterious, masterful, and among the most artistically advanced in pre-Columbian South America. Flourishing from around 600 BCE to 400 CE, La Tolita, also known as Tumaco La Tolita, developed in an environment that was both harsh and fertile. Their settlements, built on elevated platforms to withstand flooding, were centers of ceremony, craft, and long-distance trade. But it was their artistry, especially in gold, that set them apart. La Tolita artisans created some of the earliest known examples of metallurgy on the continent. Using sophisticated techniques such as hammering, casting, and alloying, they produced masks, figurines, pectorals, and headdresses, often combining gold with platinum, a metal extremely difficult to work with, even by today's standards. These objects weren't simply ornamental. They were sacred, worn by rulers or priests, used in rituals, or buried with the dead. Their ceramic figures are equally remarkable, naturalistic and expressive depictions of warriors, dancers, shamans, and mythological beings. Some wear elaborate body paint or masks, suggesting transformation, perhaps between human and spirit. Others feature deformities or supernatural traits, hinting at beliefs in duality, power, and the unseen world. Despite their brilliance, much about La Tolita remains unknown. No writing system has been found, and their decline around the 5th century CE is still debated. Was it environmental, political, or the quiet merging into newer traditions? Today, their golden masks and red clay statues survive as silent emissaries from a world that knew the power of both beauty and belief. And somewhere, beneath the rainforest floor, the rest of their story waits untouched, unfinished, and gleaming in the dark. The Casmasecan culture in the dry valleys of coastal Peru. Long before the rise of the Inca, a mysterious civilization flourished, one that carved its legacy into stone, then vanished into silence. This was the Casmasecan culture, a people whose monuments whisper secrets that remain unsolved to this day, dating back over 3,500 years. The Casmasecan left behind massive stone complexes, most notably the Second Bao and Second Alto sites, featuring some of the oldest monumental architecture in the Americas. Towering adobe pyramids and ceremonial plazas suggest a highly organized society, while nearby engravings depict violent, ritualistic imagery, decapitated heads, dismembered limbs, and stern-faced warriors etched in stone. Were these warnings, historical records, or scenes from a sacred rite? Despite the brutality shown in the carvings, archaeologists have found little evidence of widespread warfare in the region. Instead, the images may reflect an elite class using visual power to assert dominance, or perhaps to dramatize cosmological myths, long lost to time. Even more curious is the precision with which these early people constructed their ceremonial centers, aligned with astronomical markers and built with advanced engineering for their era. The structures suggest a deep understanding of both the heavens and the earth, but then, the culture faded, its knowledge and traditions absorbed, overwritten, or buried. What happened to the Casmasecan? Why did they turn to such visceral imagery? And how much of their story still lies hidden beneath the sands of Peru? The Carol civilization, hidden deep in the Soup Valley of coastal Peru, lies one of the oldest urban centers ever discovered in the Americas. Long before the Incas rose to power, a sophisticated civilization thrived here quietly, rewriting everything we thought we knew about ancient history. This is the mystery of the Carol civilization, dating back to around 2600 BCE. Carol is as old as the pyramids of Egypt, yet for centuries it remained buried beneath layers of desert dust, undisturbed and forgotten. When archaeologists finally uncovered its massive platform mounds, sunken circular plazas, and residential zones, they were stunned not just by its age, but by its complexity. There were no signs of warfare, no weapons. Instead, Carol appeared to be built on trade, music, and shared infrastructure. Intricately woven quipus, knotted strings believed to encode information, were found here long before the Inca used them. Flutes made from pelican bones echoed with the sound of an early culture steeped in ceremony and communication. Yet, what's most fascinating is what's missing. No pottery, no signs of conquest, no written language. How did such a peaceful and organized society thrive in complete isolation? Despite decades of study, many questions remain. Who were the Carol people? What caused their decline? And why did such an advanced civilization leave behind so few clues? In the heart of Peru's arid landscape, Carol whispers of a forgotten legacy, one that continues to defy our understanding of what it means to be civilized. The Recuay culture in the shadow of Peru's towering Andes, between stone fortresses and highland valleys, an ancient culture once thrived, warrior-like, artistic, and mysterious. Known as the Recuay, they flourished over 1,500 years ago, yet much about them remains veiled in silence. Emerging around 200 BCE in the northern highlands of present-day Ancash, the Recuay culture built fortified hilltop settlements that suggest a life marked by conflict and strategy. Their architecture was deliberate: massive stone compounds, narrow defensive corridors, and underground storage chambers, all designed to withstand siege and protect their community. But the Recuay were more than warriors. They were artists of remarkable depth. Their sculpted ceramics, often decorated in red, white, and black depict gods, nobles, warriors, and supernatural beings. Many vessels featured dual spouts and stirrup handles, echoing earlier Chavin influences, yet clearly possessing a distinctive style of their own. Perhaps most haunting are their stone carvings, fierce warriors holding trophy heads, jaguar-like deities, and enigmatic figures caught between the mortal and spiritual worlds. These motifs hint at a worldview steeped in ritual, ancestor veneration, and the ever-present balance between life and death. And yet, despite their legacy etched in stone and clay, the Recuae left behind no written records. Their language, their beliefs, and the full extent of their power remain unknown. High in the Andes, among the ruins they left behind, the Recuae story lingers fragmented and elusive, waiting for its final chapter to be uncovered. The Vicus culture beneath the coastal sands of northern Peru. A forgotten civilization once thrived, one whose artistry and burial rituals still defy easy explanation. This is the story of the Vicus culture, emerging around 200 BCE and lasting until roughly 600 CE. The Vicus people occupied the Pura Valley, creating an advanced society long before the rise of the Inca. While they left no written records, their legacy is etched in metal, ceramics, and enigmatic tombs. The Vicus were among the earliest in South America to master copper and gold metallurgy, crafting intricate ornaments and ceremonial objects with a level of sophistication that suggests both deep technical knowledge and symbolic intent. But it's their burial sites that continue to puzzle archaeologists. Elite tombs were built in vertical shafts over 20 meters deep, with bodies positioned beside elaborate offerings, masks, tools, and vividly painted pottery. Many of these ceramics feature hybrid figures, part human, part animal, part unknown. Were they symbolic guardians, representations of shamanic transformation, or depictions of beings from myth or memory? Even more curious is the apparent absence of urban centers. How did such a skilled and hierarchical culture operate without a major city? And why did they vanish so quietly, leaving only their artifacts buried beneath the earth? The Vicus culture whispers of a world both familiar and foreign, a civilization built on artistry, ritual, and silence. And for now, the sands of Pura continued to keep many of their secrets hidden. The Lambayeque-Sican culture in the arid valleys of northern Peru, where the desert meets the sea, a mysterious civilization rose to power and then disappeared, leaving behind pyramids, gold masks, and an enduring enigma. This is the story of the Lambayeque, also known as the Sican culture, flourishing between 750 and 1375 CE. The Lambayeque built an extraordinary society centered in the La Leche and Lambayeque valleys. Their capital, the city of Baton Grande, was a sprawling complex of adobe pyramids, some rising over 30 meters high, aligned with the stars and built to impress both man and gods. But it wasn't just architecture that defined them. The Lambayeque were master metallurgists, producing delicate works in gold, arsenical bronze, and tumbaga, an alloy of gold and copper that dazzled with both beauty and symbolism. Among the most striking discoveries are the golden funerary masks, their wide eyes and protruding ears crafted to represent Namelap, a mythical founder said to have arrived from the sea. Legend says he founded a dynasty of kings, but when his line broke, catastrophe followed: floods, famine, and ruin. Their tombs tell a story of hierarchy, ritual, and death. Elite burials were hidden deep beneath monumental platforms, sealed away with sacrificed attendants and intricate offerings. But questions remain. What was the true identity of Namelap? Was he myth, ruler, or something else entirely? And why did the Lambayeque vanish so suddenly? Their cities abandoned, their culture absorbed into the rising Chima Empire. The Lambayeque left behind no written words, only gold, silence, and the outline of a mystery still buried beneath the sand. The Chachapoya civilization, high in the cloud forests of the Andes, where mist clings to mountaintops and cliffs drop into green abysses, lived a people known to the Inca as the warriors of the clouds. This is the story of the Chachapoya flourishing. From around 800 to 1470 CE, in what is now northern Peru, the Chachapoya civilization thrived in one of the most remote and rugged landscapes in South America, isolated by steep valleys and thick jungle. They built towering stone settlements on ridgelines, including the awe-inspiring Kulap, a massive fortress city often compared to Machu Picchu, yet older and still only partially excavated. Their Architecture was distinct: circular stone houses, tall defensive walls, and decorative friezes made of white limestone. But it's their burial sites that have drawn the most intrigue. High on cliff faces, in places nearly impossible to reach, the Chachapoya placed sarcophagi, shaped like human figures, known as pyramids, staring out over the valleys like silent guardians. Others were buried in hidden mausoleums tucked into rock alcoves, sealed away with offerings of textiles, ceramics, and feathers. Despite their remoteness, the Chachapoya were eventually conquered by the Inca in the late 15th century, though not without resistance. Even after their fall, whispers of their fierce independence and mysterious ways lived on in local legend. Little of their language, customs, or history was ever recorded. And as the cloud forests slowly reclaim their stone cities, the question lingers: how much of the Chachapoya story still waits, hidden in the mist, to be uncovered? The Nazca civilization, in the dry, wind-swept plains of southern Peru, where rainfall is scarce and the land seems lifeless. An ancient culture etched its vision into the earth itself, leaving behind one of the most enduring and perplexing mysteries of the ancient world. This is the story of the Nazca civilization. Flourishing between 200 BCE and 600 CE, the Nazca thrived in a region where survival required ingenuity. They built underground aqueducts, known as puquios, to tap into hidden water sources, turning arid desert into productive farmland. But their most famous legacy lies not underground, but written across the desert floor. The Nazca lines, vast geoglyphs, stretching over 500 square kilometers, depict hummingbirds, spiders, monkeys, and geometric shapes. Some are over 300 meters long, their proportions near perfect, visible only from the sky. The purpose of these colossal figures remains uncertain. Were they ritual walkways, astronomical calendars, messages to the gods? Despite decades of study, no single explanation has been proven. Nazca pottery, textiles, and burial practices suggest a rich religious life, centered around nature, fertility, and water. Their temples were places of ceremony, offerings, and perhaps sacrifice, all aimed at appeasing the powerful forces that governed life in the desert. Then, around 600 CE, something changed. Environmental degradation, overuse of resources, or shifting climate patterns may have led to their decline. Their cities emptied, their lines left to fade beneath the desert wind. Yet the Nazca left behind no texts, only symbols, giant silent messages carved into earth and time. And still, they ask a quiet question of every observer: why? The Huapa culture in the highland valleys of central Peru. Before the rise of great empires and monumental cities, a lesser-known culture quietly laid the groundwork for one of the Andes' most influential civilizations. This is the story of the Huapa. Active between 200 and 700 CE, the Huapa culture emerged in the Ayacucho region, thriving in a landscape of rolling hills and steep ridges. Though modest in scale, their society demonstrated early advances in agriculture, religious practice, and regional trade. Using terraced farming and irrigation, they adapted to highland conditions, cultivating maize, potatoes, and quinoa in a region not easily tamed. What makes the Huapa especially significant is their role as a cultural bridge. Their ceramic styles, settlement patterns, and religious iconography show clear connections to earlier Andean traditions, yet also hint at what would come later. Their influence is most strongly seen in the rise of the Wari Empire, one of the first true Andean states, which inherited and expanded upon Huapa foundations. At sites like Cavinpuquio, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of planned urban centers, early temple structures, and ceramics featuring geometric designs and stylized human figures. These fragments suggest a society transitioning from local tribal communities to a more centralized and organized culture. And yet, much about the Huapa remains elusive. Without a writing system or monumental architecture, their voice in history is faint, heard only through shards of pottery, remnants of homes, and the DNA of the empires they helped inspire. Who were the Huapa really? Precursors to greatness, or a civilization with its own untold legacy, waiting patiently beneath the soil? The Chincha kingdom along the sun-drenched coast of southern Peru, where desert meets ocean, rose a maritime kingdom known more for its fleets than its fortresses. Flourishing in the shadow of larger empires, the Chincha kingdom forged a powerful identity rooted in trade, seafaring, and quiet wealth. The Chincha emerged around 900 CE and reached their peak just before the Inca conquest in the 15th century. Strategically located in the fertile Chincha Valley, they built a sophisticated society centered not on conquest, but commerce. Their influence stretched far along the Pacific coast. Their merchants traveled by sea on balsa rafts, trading goods such as spondylus shells, ceramics, cotton, and dried fish with distant cultures as far north as Ecuador. Their capital, marked by adobe temples and stepped platforms, reflected both religious devotion and centralized governance. At the heart of their belief system stood the worship of a moon deity, a striking contrast to the sun-focused cosmology of the Inca. The Chincha also practiced elaborate funerary rituals, burying their elites with fine textiles, carved wooden idols, and imported luxury items, signaling their extensive trade networks and high status. When the Inca arrived in the 15th century, they absorbed the Chincha swiftly, but not entirely by force. The Chincha elite were incorporated into the Inca administration, their trading networks preserved, even respected. Yet, as time passed and empires fell, the Chincha identity faded, their role as coastal traders gradually forgotten. What remains is the outline of a kingdom that built its power not on war, but on water, wind, and distant shores. What more might we uncover about this quiet maritime power, still buried beneath layers of earth and tide? The Arawak civilization across the river-laced landscapes of the Caribbean, northern South America, and deep into the Amazon basin. A vast and interconnected network of societies once flourished, bound not by a single kingdom, but by language, trade, and shared belief. This is the story of the Arawak civilization. The Arawak were not one people, but a broad cultural and linguistic group stretching from the rainforests of the Orinoco River to the islands of the Greater Antilles. By the time Europeans arrived in the late 15th century, the Arawak, especially their island branch, the Taino, had developed complex agricultural societies, large villages, and rich spiritual traditions centered on ancestor worship and nature spirits called zemis. Skilled in canoe navigation, the Arawak established trade networks that spanned hundreds of miles, exchanging cassava, cotton, ceramics, tobacco, and ritual objects. Their societies were organized into chiefdoms, each led by a cacique, who governed both the political and ceremonial life of the community. Peaceful and deeply communal, the Arawak valued cooperation over conquest, a trait that would tragically shape their fate. With the arrival of Spanish explorers, the Arawak were among the first indigenous peoples to encounter colonization. Within decades, their populations were decimated by violence, disease, and enslavement. What had once been a widespread civilization with elaborate ball courts, religious carvings, and agricultural innovation began to vanish from the historical record. Yet, the Arawak legacy endures, in words, in music, and in the living traditions of descendant communities across the Amazon and Caribbean. And as archaeologists continue to trace their ancient roots and rituals, a question remains: how much of this forgotten civilization still lies hidden in the forests and islands they once called home? The Taino, before the arrival of European ships on the shores of the Caribbean, a vibrant and deeply spiritual civilization thrived among the islands. They were the Taino, the principal culture of the Greater Antilles, and the first indigenous people to encounter Columbus in 1492. The Taino were part of the larger Arawak cultural group, yet developed a distinct identity in the Caribbean, particularly in what is now Cuba, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and Jamaica. By the late 15th century, their society was highly organized, with complex chiefdoms ruled by caciques, who oversaw everything from agriculture to religious ceremonies. They lived in large wooden villages, cultivated crops like cassava, sweet potatoes, and maize, and fished the warm island waters with remarkable skill. Their lives were shaped by spirituality. They carved sacred figures known as zemis, believed to house ancestral spirits and deities, and held elaborate ceremonies that included music, dance, and ritual ball games. Taino art, tools, and pottery reveal a people of great creativity and craftsmanship. Their language even left its mark on the world. Words like canoe, hurricane, and barbecue trace their roots back to Taino origins. But within decades of European contact, their population was devastated by disease, slavery, and violence. For centuries, it was believed that Taino had vanished completely. Yet today, new research, genetic, archaeological, and cultural, tells a different story. Descendants of the Taínos still live across the Caribbean and beyond, reclaiming their identity and restoring lost traditions. The Taíno may have been silenced, but they were never truly gone. And the question now isn't whether they survived, but how their story will continue to be told. The Kalinagoin, the lush islands of the eastern Caribbean, long before European sails darkened the horizon, lived a fierce and resilient people known as the Kalinago, often called the Caribs. Their name evokes images of warriors and seafarers, a culture both feared and misunderstood by early explorers. The Kalinago inhabited islands such as Dominica, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, thriving from at least the first millennium CE. Unlike many neighboring groups, they were skilled navigators and formidable fighters, known for their swift canoes and mastery of the sea. Their society was organized into chiefdoms led by caciques, who governed through a mix of diplomacy, warfare, and spiritual authority. Archaeological evidence reveals the Kalinago practiced agriculture, cultivating crops like cassava and sweet potatoes, while also relying heavily on fishing and hunting. Their oral histories and art speak of a rich spiritual life, centered on ancestral spirits and nature deities. European accounts from the 15th and 16th centuries often portrayed the Kalinago as fierce adversaries, a reputation that fueled both fear and fascination. Yet this perspective overlooked a complex society with deep connections to their environment and neighbors. Despite centuries of colonization, displacement, and conflict, the Kalinago people persist. Today, their descendants maintain vibrant communities, particularly in Dominica, where the Kalinago territory remains a living testament to their enduring heritage. The story of the Kalinago is one of survival and strength, a reminder that history is never just what is written, but also what is lived and remembered. And in the forests and seas of the Caribbean, their legacy continues to whisper through the wind. The Timucua Dupe, in the wetlands and forests of what is now northern Florida and southern Georgia, lived the Timucua, a Native American people whose complex society flourished long before European contact and whose legacy remains largely hidden. In the shadow of history, the Timucua were not a single tribe, but rather a confederation of related groups speaking the Timucuan language, spread across a vast territory of rivers, lakes, and coastal plains. Their villages varied in size from small settlements to larger towns, often strategically located near waterways that provided fish, shellfish, and fertile land for agriculture. Skilled in cultivating maize, beans, and squash, the Timucua supplemented farming with hunting and gathering. They crafted pottery, wove baskets, and carved wooden tools, artifacts that reveal a rich material culture intertwined with spiritual beliefs, centered on nature and ancestral spirits. When Spanish explorers arrived in the 16th century, they encountered a people organized under chiefdoms led by caciques, each with distinct political and religious roles. Missionary efforts by the Spanish sought to convert the Timucua, resulting in the creation of some of the earliest indigenous written documents in North America, using a written form of their language. Yet despite these records, much of Timucua culture was lost through disease, warfare, and assimilation during the colonial period. Today, no federally recognized Timucua tribes remain, and much about their way of life is reconstructed through archaeology and the sparse written accounts of their time. The Timucua story is one of resilience and disappearance, a culture once vibrant, now whispering through the rivers and forests, waiting for the past to be fully uncovered. The Appalachian, the rolling hills and fertile river valleys of what is now the Florida Panhandle. The Appalachian people built a thriving society long before European explorers arrived. Known for their agriculture, craftsmanship, and complex social organization, the Appalachian were a prominent force in the southeastern woodlands, flourishing from around 900 CE until the early 18th century. The Appalachian cultivated maize, beans, squash, and tobacco. Using sophisticated farming techniques suited to their environment, their villages ranged from small hamlets to large towns, often surrounded by defensive earthworks, evidence of a society aware of both cooperation and conflict. Archaeological finds reveal intricate pottery styles, shell tools, and stone weaponry, showcasing skilled artisanship. The Appalachian were also known for their mound-building practices, constructing platform mounds that served as ceremonial centers and the residences of elite leaders. When Spanish missionaries arrived in the 16th century, they established missions within Appalachia territory, attempting to convert the population to Christianity. Despite initial cooperation, the Appalachia faced increasing pressure from rival tribes and European colonizers, culminating in devastating attacks during the early 1700s that led to the dispersal and decline of their communities. Though much of Appalachia culture was disrupted or lost during this period, descendants and historians continued to piece together their history, uncovering a people whose resilience and ingenuity left a lasting imprint on the southeastern landscape. Today, the story of the Appalachia reminds us that beneath the soil and forests lie echoes of a civilization shaped by both nature and human determination, a legacy still waiting to be fully understood.